What is going on, everybody? Thank you all so much for tuning in to this segment. I'm here with a very, very special guest. You all who are probably watching me already know who he is. So I will, with no further ado, I would like to reintroduce back on the show Jimmy Dore. How you doing, Jimmy?
Niko, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
No, of course, it's my absolute pleasure. Before we get started with all the jibber jabber, do you have any more tour dates coming up that you want to let the audience know about?
Oh yeah, definitely. We'll be in Levittown. We'll be in San Diego. We'll be in. There's lots of. Just go to jimmydore.com. Red Bank, New Jersey, uh,
Oh,
Houston, Orlando, Tampa, Boca Raton. So there's lots of places we're going. So go to. We're probably coming to your town. Go to jimmydore.com. There's the link for all the tickets there. Thanks for bringing it up.
yeah, of course. And I've been to about two or three of Jimmy's shows, and both the stand up and the political shows. And let me tell you, it's hilarious. It's nonstop laughter. I love how much you get involved with the audience, and it's really a time also, just as an aside, for like camaraderie amongst people who may feel a little bit isolated politically. Um,
Correct.
because there's so many independent thought bringers. I mean, you will see anything from extreme leftists to conservatives to people who don't even really care about politics outside of watching Jimmy's show. Jimmy was just talking about how some people from the labor movement was at his last show. So it's a good networking opportunity as well, if that's something that you're into. So I definitely encourage you all to check out Jimmy's show if you have not been yet. It is absolutely worth the money, and it just really does not cost that much. So I want to go ahead and talk about the elephant in the movement at this point. I think that you would agree. You did an interview with Dr. Cornel West, who's running for the Green Party presidential ticket. It looks like he's already going to basically get the primary victory, because I don't think anybody else is running against him. I think he's unopposed. So you had him on, and y'all had an interaction that started out pretty good, and then it kind of went south. And you were asking him questions that it seemed like he either was not understanding or didn't understand the connotation, that like the context and why you were asking them. And then I feel like at one point y'all both got offensive or defensive, excuse me. So can you give me your perception of what took place first, and then like what you would have liked to have taken place?
Yeah. Um, I was surprised. I wasn't trying to be hostile. I was trying to be, respectful and address these concerns because they're real concerns, and it's a real, knife in the heart when I hear him out there saying that we got to be afraid of Donald Trump's fascism and Joe Biden's just a milquetoast neoliberal, and so we got to worry about fascism from Trump. That's the message the Democratic Party has.
Yeah.
When so and the Democratic Party only has that to run on, that they're the lesser of two evils, and then they run on identity politics. They run on LGBTQ trans, and they also call anybody who's their opponent a white supremacist. That's their thing. That's their flex. They call them. I made the point on my show, like, if you said that the virus came from a lab, they would call you a white supremacist. They're saying you're a white supremacist if you work out now. I mean, they're just going nuts with
That's
that.
true.
And
That's very
so
true. It's very true.
so that was I was trying to impress upon him that. And when he said, I don't think that's a bad message, I was just blown away, like how he was being obtuse on purpose. And so I thought I was being more respectful when I said, hey, you're getting bad advice from your
Yeah.
advisor. So instead of me saying, hey, you're wrong, and this is a bad idea and this is dumb, I tried to give him an out, like, hey, you're getting bad advice. And I thought that was just like something nice I was saying. And he
Yeah.
took offense at that.
Yeah. See,
And
he so during our interview, he mentioned like he took offense to that. And I did explain
why
actually
did
during the interview
why?
that I would have been like, I would have, if I was going to criticize something like that,
Why?
I would have assumed he had an advisor too, because he's a president.
Everybody has advisors. Nobody, that's not an insult. So he
Yeah.
went out of his way to be insulted by that. He
Yeah.
tried to make it contentious because and it seems now in retrospect that he was getting bad advice from an infiltrator, which he just announced his new campaign manager, Peter Dow, who's a
Mhm.
Trojan horse from the DNC, comes right from the Clinton Foundation, right from the Clinton campaign, right from David Brock. This guy's an infiltrator. And, I said that to him. I said, I don't know who's advising you. He sounds like an infiltrator. I said that in
Mhm.
our interview. I didn't know he was talking to Peter Dow at the time. But of course, that's why he got sensitive and overreacted, because he was talking to an infiltrator. The guy's Peter Dow. And so that's why I think he overreacted. So that's my guess on what
So
he overreacted.
I'm gonna table that part because I do want to talk about that. But so when we talked, he actually said what rubbed him the wrong way was when you when you initially posited your points, like, okay, I want to coach you on this, or I want to educate you on this particular issue. That immediately rubbed him the wrong way because he felt like, okay, would you have said something like this to a Tulsi Gabbard or presented that way? Would you have presented that as an
Of
to
course.
RFK?
Of
Huh?
course. Of course. That's just garbage. That's just garbage. Of course. I challenged Tulsi Gabbard on her just being in the military.
Yeah, challenging, yes, but the specific, so basically the way he said was a specific use of language that bothered him, and
So
like,
if he wants to be thin-skinned, he's not running for so if he's going to be thin-skinned like that, that sounds to me like the opposite of someone who's running for president. He's not asking for votes. He's not trying to broaden his base. That's the opposite of that. You're going to be that thin. You got a super supporter. I'm a super supporter. I'm trying to help you. All he has to do is say, well, that's your opinion, brother, and I appreciate it. That's all he had to say.
I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. Like, you got
to trying to say that somehow I'm talking down to him and it being insulting. That is such bullshit. Everybody knows that everybody has advisors. And I was just trying to be polite, and he was going out of his way to be insulted. And that's what happened. And then from there on out, he had a chip on his shoulder. And that's why, and you know, at the end of the conversation, I showed him the Black Caucus of the Green Party, how they said that COVID lockdowns and COVID policy was the issue of the day.
I remember you said that.
So then he says that he's going to have a truth commission to find out what exactly happened in COVID. Now, I was going like this. I was shaking my fist like, yes, right on. And then instead of ending on agreement like a real politician would, like someone who's actually running for president, instead of ending on an appointed agreement, he went out of his way to find a way to disagree with me, which is the exact opposite of someone who's actually running for president. And that's not what you do. So he then said, but he goes, we're going to have a truth commission and all that and find out exactly. And I'm doing like that. We agree. Let's end on a high note. I'm with you. That's great. I can't wait to see it. He then says, but I'm sorry. You and I live in different worlds, and you're obsessed. I'm going to paraphrase. We said you made it out like I was obsessed with a vaccine, and so it just shows he's completely. I know he's completely out of touch with COVID. I know most of the Green Party got it 100% wrong. Most of the people I admire got it wrong. So I'm trying to impress upon him that this is a super big issue, that you could get a lot of votes through this. The Medical Freedom Act. I just met people at my show in New York City, 3 people starting a party, the Medical Freedom Party, and they got ballot access for some. So there's a big group out there. And so that's what I'm trying to impress upon him on. And if you're worried about fascism, there was no greater fascism than the COVID lockdowns that crushed everybody, workers, 41% of Black businesses. And then we were forced to take experimental medical treatments. 70,000 workers got fired in one state alone. So if you really cared about workers, this would be a fire in your belly for this, which he doesn't have. And he went out of his way to let me know that he doesn't have a fire in the belly over this.
So I will say, one of my biggest issues so I haven't endorsed anybody at this point. And one of the reasons why, even though I support Cornel West and I would consider him a friend, is because of the vaccine issue. That's important to me as the Israel-Palestine conflict. Like, those are kind of like 2 red lines for me. And I'm like, Now, and I agree with you on that. And I also tend to agree on the fact that Biden is definitely a bigger fascist and definitely a more competent fascist than Trump. And I feel like the Democrats are the same because they're much more effective at it at this point. Now, just speaking from his perspective, from the conversation we had, what he said basically, and I'm once again paraphrasing, is that it almost felt like you were almost insensitive. He felt like you were being insensitive to the points that he was making about race, because when you said if you mention race, it's ID Paul full stop, like identity politics full stop, then it delegitimizes the legitimate struggles that people are having, because we know that the Democratic Party co-ops those struggles. And that's usually what you're referring to when you're talking about ID politics. But he didn't. He thought that what you were saying is, don't talk about racism at all in any capacity, or you're doing the Democrats' bidding. That's how he felt like it came off, and that's with some of the audience members who were watching. That's how they felt like it came off. I would say that's probably just a misinterpretation of what he was saying, because you guys were, at this point, we're going back and forth. So none of you all really got to expound upon your thoughts. But what do you say to that? Like, Do you feel like maybe that could have been conveyed a little bit better? I'm not mistaken. You don't believe that like acknowledging racism is in and of itself the Democrats' version of ID politics, correct?
No, of course not. And I'm saying that when you wrap your message in the bow of Biden's lesser of two evil and white supremacy and male supremacy, which I'd seen him do many, I'm letting him know that that's not landing with the audience he wants it to land with, right? That's I'm not saying that black activists or black politicians shouldn't talk about racism and try to educate people. That's not what I'm saying. I'm trying to let him know that when he does talk about it, he's talking about it in a way that alienates people. That when you and by the way, it
the way
plays
it's worded.
into
Okay.
and when you do that, no, even if you don't want to, I'm talking about in the context of a presidential campaign. That's the Democrats' message.
Your strategy.
The Democrats' message is we're running against white supremacists, we're running against fascists, and we're the lesser of two evil. And so when he makes those, it just sounds like he's campaigning as a Democrat. That's only, hey, you can disagree with me on that. That doesn't make me a racist. Which is what people are calling me and making it all about my skin color. This idea that when people criticize me, the first thing they lead was you're white. That is such again, that I'm trying to fight back against that. My message is it's not left, right. It's not black, white. It's us against them. It's right against wrong. And that's the only thing that scares them. Like Christian Smalls did. I'm endorsing the message that Christian Smalls had on Staten Island. That's the message that someone who's running for president should have. And that's what I was trying to impress upon him. And the message I can play you the video, Christian Smalls. I said, now he organized with lots of Trumpers. Did you lead with white supremacy? Did you lead with And he said, no, we're going to fight. We're all the same. We're all workers. We're all workers, and we have to join together against the oligarchy. And that's a winning message. So that's what I was trying to impress upon him on. But then immediately my critics want to make it about black, white, all that. And I'm saying when you put a bow on your message of white supremacy, male supremacy, it's not landing the way you think it's landing.
Yeah.
Because what it does, it makes white people feel like they have to feel bad about how we were born. And that doesn't broaden your message.
Like when you're talking about campaign strategy, and if you're talking so I would say a better way to put it is when we're talking about the broad audience that you're campaigning to, like we have to still remember that the reality is like only 13% of the country is black, even less Hispanic, even less Asian, et cetera, et cetera. So I feel like it's a know your audience situation. Of course, we can acknowledge racism. We should acknowledge racism, especially if it happens to pop up for the conversation. But there's also the reality that you have to know your audience. It's like when you're doing your show, right? Or when you're talking to the public, you have to know like the level of political knowledge or lack thereof that they have before you like start talking or telling your jokes. Like when your show in West Palm that I went to was different than the show you did in California, which is basically strictly politics. It's just another one of your podcasts. But the show in West Palm was specifically a show about it was just comedy. It was all comedy. It wasn't really politically driven. It's still hilarious, but it was a different audience expecting different things. And when you're campaigning for president, you're basically that you have to keep that in mind. Like every audience has different expectations, and you have to be able to communicate that effectively if you want to win them over. Am I right?
That was my message 100%. And I was just trying to help. And I knew there was nothing in it for me, and I knew people were going to bad faith attack me for it. And that's exactly what happened. And they made it about me being white and him being black, which again, once you emphasize that in a political campaign, that's a losing message. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying that there isn't a connection between racism and class and I'm not saying any of that. What I'm saying is that in the context of a presidential campaign, you have to figure out how to message that in a way that's effective, that broadens your base and that brings people in instead of pushing people away. I want Cornel West's campaign to be successful. And then he called me a Trumper. That which is just garbage, right?
Yeah,
so he just revealed to himself to have a thin skin and to just to do gutter politics when he doesn't have an answer. So when he was saying, he was literally on my show making the case that Trump is the greater evil and Biden is the lesser evil. And when I showed him that he wasn't, that actually the Democrats are not the lesser evil, and who was I quoting? I'm quoting the Black Agenda report. And so when I did that, he called me a secret Trumper. That's garbage. That's gutter politics. He wasn't, and that's a guy not looking to run for president. So when people
I can say you must have gotten through to him in some way, because when he came on the show for my interview, which I'm posting later on today, he actually was just as critical as Biden as he was of Trump, which obviously wasn't the conversation that y'all had. So some of what you said must have landed home. Some of what you said must have landed home. So that's a good thing. Now,
well, that is a good thing.
I will say that, so my thing, and we've talked about this offline, like my thing is like the perception of what you guys were saying to each other, which seemed to not to be completely misunderstood, not only by you guys, but by everybody in the audience watching. And so now people beyond y'all's personal relationship are feeling down in the dumps, not just because they disagree with Cornel West, but because of the mere fact that you guys aren't disagreeing now, or excuse me, are disagreeing to such an, not just on a few issues. Now it's like, it's become so personal, and in my opinion, unnecessarily so. Do you feel like there's any way going forward that you all could have a conversation separate from the camera where you all can gain a better understanding of what you were trying to communicate? Because I do feel like it was just a lot of miscommunication and a little bit of bruised egos getting involved, and then everybody in the audience watching, and and everybody being aware of that. Do you feel like separate from that, like from the camera, where the audiences are watching, that perhaps y'all could, going forward for the sake of the movement, have a conversation where y'all could kind of communicate better what your expectations were and what they are going forward?
Oh, no doubt about it. That's what I was seeking in the first place. I wanted to help him. I offered his campaign to help with messaging, speech writing, and fundraising, and silence. I got silence. So that's too bad that I had to do it on air. It wasn't like he was rushing to get on my show. It was really hard for us to get him booked. We had to call him every day for about 2 months straight just to get an interview. And then, of course, when he got on my show, he couldn't get off fast enough. He already had 1 foot out the door. And so that's not, again, these are things that shows me that he's not serious about running for president. If you were serious about running for president, you would want to stay on my show as long as possible, because this is exactly the audience you need to reach. And you would want to get, and so he didn't. No politician runs for president like that, where you get insulted when someone says that you have advisors. You call the person who's your biggest supporter the same slimy slander that they use on him. The same thing they use on him, they call him a Trump supporter. That as soon as I got to his left, he threw that at me. That shows a flex of a guy who's got a thin skin, a fragile ego, and he's not ready, really running for president. That's not how you act if you're really running for president. You can't wait to get off my show, the show that that does exactly what his campaign has to do: reach across left, right, center, class lines. Just like you said, when you go to my show, there's hippies there. There's guys in suits and ties. I had a table of Hasidic Jews at my show in Philadelphia. So we have all different, old, young, white, black, all kinds of people. I had labor organizers at my show just last week in Michigan. And not only that, I had almost at every time one of my gigs, there's a Julian Assange group out in front. So this is who he's got to get to. And that's what I was trying to impress upon him. But honest to God, he doesn't seem interested at all. And he doesn't seem curious. Now, when you said he changed his message when he came on here, so maybe I did have an effect on him, because everybody from the Revolutionary Blackout Network, everybody knows that's a losing message to say that Donald Trump's a fascist and Joe Biden isn't, and that
emphasize Donald Trump's racism without ever mentioning Biden's.
Joe Biden's a bigger racist, is just as big. Let's put it this way, just as big. He's actually been more detrimental to the black and brown community. Joe Biden did, for sure. When he asked me, couldn't believe he asked the question, how is Joe Biden a bigger fascist than Trump? I go, well, the black and brown people are locked up at higher rates than any, and we have the biggest penal colony in the world because of Joe Biden, not Donald Trump. Donald Trump did the step back, which actually got him more support. 2 out of 10 black voters are going to vote for Donald Trump. That are you going to call them white supremacists? Are you going to call them neo-fascists? Are you going to call the Joe Biden is the racist? He's always been a racist. He's bragged about it. He bragged about he didn't want his kids growing up in a racial jungle. Remember what Kamala Harris said to him at the debate? All that stuff that all gets wiped away from Cornel West's message. It's all gone. Joe Biden's the good guy, and brother Biden's the good guy, and Trump's a neo-fascist.
Yeah,
and nobody even knows.
And the only way, like, I can understand where you're coming from when you're saying you're getting bad advice, because the only way that you would seem to be pressured into pretending otherwise is you have people around you that are providing some influence to convince you that Biden or the Democrats are somehow less racist. Like I was just on Revolutionary RBN yesterday, and we were talking about the fact that like Biden has put more kids in cages and more people in cages than Trump and Obama combined, and he hasn't even served a full term yet, right? He gave billions more to ICE. So at that point, what are we like? This is my frustration. And it isn't just with Cornel West. It's with people who claim that racism is this huge issue that they care about so deeply. Whenever the Black people and the Latino people that are affected by these policies are screaming, "No, these people are horrible for us." Like, no, y'all doesn't know what you're talking about. And then, like, what happens is if Dr. West complains about what Trump talks about rather than what Biden is doing and has done for 40 plus years at this point, then it delegitimizes the voices like myself or like Nick or like CJ who cares about these issues. And then, you know, we talked about that yesterday in RBN. Like, I understand how, as a Black man, I do understand sometimes it can be easy for me to be triggered by certain dialogue, because I've had people use, like, for example, especially I know he has because he's been at Harvard, like where somebody says, "Oh, I could coach you, I could educate you on this," but they weren't speaking in good faith and I knew it. But it's a very triggering thing, because that is dialogue a lot of the times, in his defense, reserved for white people to talk down or condescend at Black people. And so that's why I can understand a little bit how he got triggered. But on the other side of that fence, you have to do yourself a favor to show that, okay, say if your message was white supremacy, do you know why RBN gets away with talking about it, talking about racism, acknowledging racism? Because they're not just going to talk about it as if Trump's the only one doing it. They're not going to talk about it as if Biden's like, they're going to acknowledge the policies that the racial policies that have been passed, break it down, and then, because it's not like RBN hasn't criticized Trump. It's not like you haven't criticized Trump. It's not like I haven't criticized Trump. It's just that I'm also going to acknowledge that Biden is just as horrible. No, I always say he's worse because it's just way too many policies. He had political power. Right? The reason that Biden is so much worse is because, like, say if Trump said a bunch of racist shit, which I'm sure he did. He's an old New Yorker with a bunch of money. I'm positive he said racist shit before. At the same time, Biden was a racist. Then he got political power. Then he used that political power to see a racist agenda pushed. That is worse by far, not even close. And he brags about it. So you can't, and I said this during the interview. I said, if you're running for Green Party, which means you assume that you want to get on the debate stage and debate both, doesn't that mean you need to be challenging both to the same degree? That was my thing. I'm like, okay, say if you don't want to say Biden's words, okay, fine. Don't you just need to be criticizing equally, to an equal level, one, the person that you're running against who's going to win, obviously, the Republican primary, but then the guy who's actually in power right now that you need to unseat. Like, that's who you're trying to overthrow. Like, you need to be coming at him, just from a strategic perspective, in my opinion, harder than Trump. Just I get it.
Yes, because that message pushes away your natural allies when you do that. So, hey, go ahead and call Trump a neo-fascist, but call Joe Biden Jim Crow Joe, as the RBN does. Do it that way. Find a way. But this idea, he literally, Niko, it broke my heart to see him come on here on my show and literally make the Democratic's message. It's as if he came from the Democratic Party that on my show, and he couldn't stop arguing that Trump was the greater evil. He couldn't stop arguing it. And then he called me a Trumper when I disagreed with him, when I was actually repeating Black radical activist words. He said those are Trump words. So
that's no different than what RBN would say, what I would say. Savage,
that's right.
Donna Joy, like, that's no different than any of us.
And then that's just despicable that he did that. And I'm having a real hard time getting past it, as you can tell.
Yeah, no, I understand. Like I said, emotions were definitely high. And when I heard it, I was kind of like, I always kind of cringe at that. I'm like, Biden's worse. Like, you can't say brother Biden, and I mean, I haven't heard him say brother Trump yet, but like, I don't think he has, and which is crazy because I hear him call literally everybody he dislikes brother, and the one instance is like, oh, because Trump is worse. Like, is he make you feel worse or is he actually worse? Because those are two different things. I get it that he viscerally, the things that he says, especially because he's all audacious about it, can make you feel like his racism is worse for people, but it isn't. It just, he says some shit that pisses everybody off, and it's almost indiscriminate. It can be racist, it can be sexist, it can be he insults the Republican Party, he insults the Democratic Party, and that's just who he is. But my thing is that causes us, when you react emotionally, it causes us to lose focus, and the Democrats weaponize that against us.
100%. I tried to make that case, and that, you know, the Democrats have learned how to weaponize white supremacy against workers. That's what's happening. And so I was just trying to impress upon him that, you know, you don't have to change who you are. You don't have to change what you're concerned about. You just need better messaging because you're actually running for president. And he looked at that as insulting, triggering, thin-skinned, and it insulted his ego, and it didn't look good for him. Doesn't matter how it looks for me. I'm not running for president. He's the one running for president. It looked horrible for him. He looked horrible. And his message is 100% muddled, and he doesn't know how to reach out like Christian Smalls did, and he doesn't seem interested. And to go out of your way to find a way to disagree with me over COVID, when he said he's for a truth commission, and then went out of his way to find a way. So all those guys didn't get it. Chomsky, him, most of the Green Party, the Democratic Party, most people didn't get COVID. They don't get what happened. He's talking about, you're worried about fascism coming. What that is 100%. They're going to force you to take a medical experiment. And by the way, which we still don't know what the results are. These people, we're finding out side effects every day. There's excess deaths. What is that? People dying over the rate of they're supposed to by 10, 20, 30, 40% in the countries that had the highest uptake of vaccines. And so we have to look into that. Is that because of the vaccine? Well, a lot of people say it is. We have to look into that. That should be a huge concern. And we know that Fauci's a liar. He gave Fauci unbelievable praise. He said he was the paragon of integrity and love and all that stuff. And Dr. Fauci is more evil like Mengele. Look what he did with black kids and AIDS research. Look what he did to AIDS. Look what he did everywhere. He did so, and he's a liar. I mean,
honestly, I don't know how you could look at Fauci and even think that he's telling the truth at any point. Like, he looks like a liar. The dude talks like a scammer off of a Batman movie. Like, he talks like one. And I 100% agree with you on that issue. Like, that is not even if I had it, I wouldn't even get to talk about it much. But if I had an hour and a half to just sit down with Dr. West and break down that issue, because people don't like you were talking about businesses in general that were destroyed. Black businesses were obliterated by these policies, people. Like, like 97, at some point, like 97% of Black businesses got shut down, and most of them didn't even reopen. So, like, that's obliterated. And that, if you care about Black issues, like I care about Black issues from a substantive policy perspective, because racism, there are people who are always going to not like you. There's always going to be stereotypes applied to you. Like, that is what it is. And that's just the world we live in. But on the other side of the fence, like, if you have the policies that support Black people in other minorities and other marginalized people, then the talk doesn't really matter all that much. Because as long as you're not messing with my money, that's basically what it comes down to. You're not messing with my money and not messing with the food that I'm trying to put on the table, then you can think whatever you want to about me. I can give two damns. That's really how I feel about it. I'm sure like a lot of people feel that way about it. So I want to shift gears really fast. So Bree sat down with Kyle and Crystal, the two best friends that I heard you're very fond of them. Okay. Heard you got a wedding invite, but you just was lost in the mail. They were talking specifically about why swing states should vote for Biden. And Carl wanted me to let you know that he's actually a bigger Biden bro than Crystal is now. So he just wanted to let you know that. He said that in the interview. But one of the arguments that was made, and this is something I also ended up going back and forth on Twitter, was that Biden's his labor board, basically. I don't want to go through that, but his labor board had made some just huge jump for labor relations that could theoretically potentially lead to massive membership increase in unions. Except So I looked it up yesterday with RBN. Do you know that all that fucking rule did was make it so that they just have to go back to the collective bargaining table and there's no actual penalty? How do people, but do you see people actually buying this from Crystal Kyle? Like you're more plugged in, you more like, more like the larger channels and the relationships between it. Like, how do people perceive this as being genuine while you simultaneously get attacked for being disingenuous, even though you literally will show whatever you're talking about? I watch show, obviously. Like, you show the stats, you show the numbers, but how do people keep falling for this shit?
So that's why I was so passionate about my message to Cornel West to not to prop up people like Kyle and Crystal, who are obvious clowns. And they're just simps. They're vote blue no matter who simps. And so there's still a lot of people who buy into the vote blue no matter who, and those are the people calling Cornel West a Trumper for running third party because he's going to help Trump and you're going to hurt Joe Biden and he's the lesser of two evil, and come on, we got to stop fascism. So that's why it's crazy when you see Brianna Joy Gray go on, and she's a Cornel West third party supporter.
Yeah,
or at least she's a third party supporter, I know for sure. And so am I. And then
she said during that interview that she's voted for Cornel West in the generals.
And then she just, and so will I. And so when Cornel West says that stuff, he just cuts the legs out from underneath people like me and her making those arguments. And he sounds like Kyle and Crystal, and it's crazy. And
that's true.
Because
y'all the ones who have to, like, on a massive, like, because of the size of your platform and your influence, y'all the ones who have to deal with the blowback, and then audiences and supporters get confused.
That's exactly right. His message is muddled. This isn't even debatable as far as I'm concerned. So that's why. And so when he's going to react like that and overreact and have thin skin and come at me and smear me and then retweet smears of me, that's not a guy who's running for president. That's a guy who's too, and if he is, he's got too fragile of an ego and thin skin to do it. And we need to work on that. Yeah,
I mean, I would say that you can't, that would be a message that I would try to partake in onto Cornel West, is that you can't react the way, no offense, that Jimmy would react to something if he's pissed off. Jimmy can react in weird ways. Jimmy's not running for president. Jimmy got a damn,
he's for president.
Yeah, Jimmy a talk show host, and like, that's just who Jimmy is. And if Jimmy has to do a mea culpa, he will. But like, the consequences are not as grand if Jimmy messes up on a message.
That's right.
Nobody's going to take that one thing and then make that the face of your camp, because we've seen where Tulsi could say one thing, for example, that may have been slightly off, and then what does the media do? They take that, and everything she says after, any way she tries to correct, it doesn't matter anymore. Right. So people will say to you, for example, just to Dr. West, okay, you said white supremacy is the biggest issue. Well, Kamala's saying the same thing. So why are you running? So that people will say that. I've seen people say that, like, literally say, well, if he cares about these issues, then why is he stopping the Democratic Party from being Trump? I've seen that, literally. And it's frustrating for people who, because I support Cornel West. Like I said, I haven't endorsed anybody, but I absolutely support him. And if it came down to in the general election, I probably would vote for him. But now the people who do support you, you put in precarious predicaments, because I'm trying to explain, like, yeah, he doesn't like Biden. Because I was kind of confused as to why people thought that. Then when I went back and saw your interview, I was like, oh, that's why people were saying it, because it seems like he's just. Now, I will say, the way you phrased some of the questions did kind of corner him, and I feel like he had to make a choice. Now, my choice would have been like, nah, fuck Biden, but like, he reacted in a way that I definitely wouldn't have, and now I see why people were like, he thinks people will endorse Biden, but he actually assured both RBN and myself he has zero plans on endorsing Biden. It's like, the thought never crosses his mind. And technically, he would be like the first person ever to do so from the Green Party, like endorse the Democratic primary or the Democratic candidate. So whatever, like I believe him. I do believe that he's not going to endorse him. However, you got to prove to people that you've changed from that recent endorsement, that your thought process has changed from that recent endorsement, because it's still fresh in a lot of people's minds. I voted for Jill Stein in 2016. I didn't vote for Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. I actually voted third party in 2020. I didn't endorse Joe Biden. That was a miscalculation, I think he made when he did that. So at both times. So and again, so that he's somehow above advice or giving
ideas from somebody else, even though he was 100% wrong. Anyway, it's just crazy. It's not, again, either that's what makes me think he's not serious about running for. Hey, where was that kind of that triggering pushback that he gave me to Anderson Cooper when Anderson Cooper called him crazy over the Ukraine war? It wasn't there, right? But
yeah, I talked about it yesterday too. Yeah, because we were like, why you don't call him Brother Anderson? Because like, so he
the guy's a warmonger. You're supposed to go on CNN and call him a warmonger because he is a war pig. And you're supposed to call out the war pigs. You're not supposed to call him your brother. You're supposed to say, stop telling people lies about the Ukraine war. Tell people what really happened. You're not telling people what really happened. He didn't say any of that.
Yeah, no, you can't, like, so he was right. He criticized you for having on Tucker Carlson. And I was like, well, I do believe Tucker Carlson has problematic stances in the past that I've called out, and you have to call out like whenever he does it. But like he's pretty damn good on foreign policy, but I do agree with holding people accountable. However, it makes it very difficult for you to make that argument and have people take it seriously when you go on Anderson Cooper and say, hey, Brother Cooper. There's a lack of ideological consistency, which I know he doesn't want to have, like, but when I can only measure facts against the facts. And I love Dr. West. Like, he knows that. Like, I have a great deal of respect for Dr. West, but the facts are the facts. And he is a Black man. I need him to, like, he knows that. He's fully aware of it. That means you have less room to mess up. This is from a personal perspective. I know this because of the space I'm in and the stuff I have to deal with. You as a Black man who used to support Bernie and now you're leaving the Democratic Party very explicitly and then challenging them, you have less room to mess up. And the consequences, unfortunately, could also be greater because of how many people have respect for you. So when you're inconsistent and people have to challenge you on like that, like just a simple thing, Tucker Carlson versus Anderson, what is the worst thing that Tucker Carlson has said or done is not it's not worse necessarily than what Anderson Cooper has done. Like, I just watched Tucker Carlson endorse Anya's book calling out corporatism in Venezuela and how basically the U.S. tries to coup them all the time, and that we're the responsible for the social, the communist Venezuela. Every other conservative would have been calling her communist. I'm not endorsing that. But Tucker actually evolved on issues. And like, you can't acknowledge that he's not your brother, but Anderson Cooper, who's a warmonger, like you said, who was reporting that during the protests in 2020 that we got some intel. We think this is Russian propagandists organizing these protests of Black people.
Yes.
You got to be consistent, my guy. You got to. It's extremely important. Like, if your message is not consistent, then like, it's not just you has to deal with the consequences. It's also those who support you.
That's it. I'm sticking my chin out to support Cornel West. I'm sticking my chin out to get, and then when he comes in there and undercuts our message and then calls me a Trumper, dude, you're not running for president. I don't know what the fuck you're doing, but you're not running for president. And now he hires a DNC insider right from the Clinton Foundation, a guy who's trained by the IDF, that slaughtered Palestinians. Did you understand?
I didn't know that was trained by the IDF.
Yes, and he brags about it. Yes, he was in. Yes, and he was a member of the militia that slaughtered all those Palestinians, 5,000 of them, and yes, and then he claims he wasn't there. But anyway, wow, that's who Peter Dow is. Peter Dow, right? I'm sorry you didn't know that, but yeah, he brags about being trained by the IDF and being a part of that militia.
And I know that he's supposed, he's been on a better path apparently since 2017-ish. And like, I'm all about redemption. I actually firmly believe that people can like change paths. But like I said the other day, like, that don't mean you got to put him in a leadership position. Like,
that's exactly right. Just to get back to the Tucker Carlson point.
Yeah.
So when Tucker Carlson would invite me on his show, it would be so I could get my message out to half the country. Not that I could help amplify his message, but his message often coincided with mine, except like for Julian Assange, right? And he admitted he admitted on camera that he changed his mind about Julian Assange.
I remember.
Based on my arguments. So that's right there. That's a win. That's a victory. And so just like Frederick Douglass said, I will join with anyone to do good and no one to do bad. Anyone
or universal health care. Remember that, how he moved on that one too? He actually talked about moving positive. He's like, you know what? Before I wouldn't even have thought about thinking of that universal health care was good. And he changed his mind on it. And so and Anderson Cooper would never. So
What else is what else is depressing to me is Cornel West's incuriousness and his lack of interest in seeing the bigger picture. So I would like to see him push back against the Russiagate narrative, which was a DNC, Hillary Clinton, FBI, CIA op, just like January 6th was.
yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
he came on and repeated CIA, FBI talking points on my show, when failing to see the connection, how the establishment, not only in America but worldwide, there's a global cabal of capitalists that run things, and they're moving on to not only narrative control and censorship, but they're moving on to criminalizing their political opposition. They're doing it with Stop Cop City, the same jury that indicted, they used the
Same grand
RICO
jury.
laws. So RICO laws, if people don't know, those were invented to go after the mafia.
Like drug
And
dealers
now
and mafia, international criminals. Yeah.
they're using it for former presidents. And how Cornell, I think it's on purpose. He's pretending not to see the connection between them criminalizing the Stop Cop City protesters, because that's what they're doing. They're criminalizing protesters against the establishment using the RICO laws, and they're doing the exact same thing to Donald Trump. Now again,
So once again, in fairness, on my show, he did acknowledge the similarities and how wrong it was, which makes it interesting that he quoted FBI talking points on your show, because he directly mentioned COINTELPRO on my show.
So maybe it was good that he had that contentious interview with me, because it seems like he's got his head straight on some things afterwards, and that's he's calling out Jim Crow Joe and Trump the same way. He sees the connection now between. He was just repeating that at January 6th stuff is such garbage. This idea that they were trying to overthrow the government. You mean a bunch of Second Amendment gun nuts showed up to overthrow the government and they forgot to bring their guns? Oh, I knew I forgot something. I had water, mittens, scarves, but I forgot the guns. Of course, they were just pissed off protesters who thought that that someone stole their election, just like the other half of the country thought that Russia had stolen their election for 4 years, and nobody called them anti-American insurrectionists. But half of those people got pushed in by FBI plants in the crowd. We know this. Niko, they had twice as much security for a forced to vote rally than they had for those people, and they knew they were coming for months and months. This is exactly what the FBI and CIA intelligence community does. They create this so they can now criminalize Trump and his political movement. That was the whole point of them doing January 6th like this, and now they're doing it to Donald Trump. The Cornel West himself said the reason why he called Trump a fascist and not Biden is because Trump tries to criminalize his political opponents. Now, he said that a few years ago, before they've been doing this to Donald Trump. And now that they're doing this to Donald Trump, it would be nice to see him make the same connection. Now, I'm not a fan of Donald Trump, never voted for Donald Trump, but I can see what they're doing. What they're doing to Donald Trump, they would do to Cornel West, they would do to Bernie Sanders. And I tried to explain to him,
they tried to do it to Bernie.
They already did it to Bernie. They Russiagated him. They said it was Russiagated him. They said his followers were sexist and racist and violent. That's exactly what so that's the playbook.
And remember, they tried to use the FBI to investigate Jane's tenure at college. Like, they literally did it. Yeah, like
they tried to criminalize their political opposition. Exactly. And so that's the game. And it broke again. This was all heartbreaking for me, and to see Cornel West be so out of touch, not to actually see he's supposed to be smarter, and which he is smart. I'm not saying he's not. So that's why it's heartbreaking when people who I know are smarter than me and have more knowledge, have read more books, fail to see what's right in front of their face, the fascism that's right in front of their face, and they fail to see how it's affected. And the reason why you stand up against the political prosecution of Donald Trump is because they're going to do it to you. It's that old saying, when they came for the Jews, I didn't say anything because I wasn't a Jew. And when they came for me, there was nobody left to say anything. That's why you're supposed to do this. And that would broaden his base. And that would, if he could call out the bullshit psyop of January 6th, if he could call out this political prosecution of Donald Trump and connect it to Stop Cop City, that, I swear to God, I would spend 24 hours a day campaigning for him, because that's what. And if he was actually,
the movements would literally start organizing themselves, and he wouldn't even have to do anything. They would,
and he wouldn't even have to do anything. But he's resistant. He can't. on my show, at least, he couldn't step away from the Democratic Party's message for campaigning. And that's a loser. And it broke my heart to see him call me a Trumper when I was just repeating our RBN black activist talking points. He called me a Trumper for it. That's despicable. It shows that he's not serious about running. And him hiring Peter Dow also shows he's not serious about running. I would like Cornel West to get serious about running so I could get more enthusiastically behind his campaign. But he's wrecking it. He's shitting the bed left and right, and he doesn't care. And he's out again. He's calling people I'm an ally, and he's smearing me in the same way he was smeared. That's pathetic.
Yeah, you gotta. I would say as a message to Cornel West, the one thing that you have to keep in mind is like the consistency is so incredibly important, because otherwise it leaves supporters confused, and supporters don't like being confused if they don't know how you feel. Because I can say pretty confidently, like I said, I know how you feel about Biden because of what we talked about on the show. And you might have said something to the same effect on RBN once. But then if you go on Jimmy's show and it seemed like you're just on a mission to because of his perceived audience, which people usually get that wrong, they think that your audience is primarily conservative, which is not the case. And then you only attack Trump because of his perceived audience. You feel like you have to like wage a vendetta against them. Then it comes off as inconsistent. Now I'm trying to figure out why people are saying you don't consider Biden a fascist when I know you said it on my show. They're trying to figure out why you only consider Trump a fascist. And now we're having conversations about everything except for your policies because it's the inconsistency. And that just puts people in a bad place. It doesn't make it easy for them to vote for you. It doesn't make it easy for them to vocally support you because they're going to be challenged at every direction. And once again, right. I'm 100% like I'm one of those people that say you cannot have a wage class warfare without acknowledging racism, because it's like a car, like class is the car, like whether we're talking about racism, sexism, whatever, like racism is your tires, damn sexism is the alternator, whatever. You miss one of those items, the class war isn't going anywhere. I firmly believe that, and everybody knows that. However, there is a way to word that message. There's a way to make that message so that you don't start off by, I said this yesterday, I'm like, you have to prove to people that you are fighting for something rather than simply fighting against something. Because when you're fighting against something, it can make you really emotional. It can make you subject to manipulation that you're not even cognizant of. And then it's easy to just keep fighting against you. You confuse allies or enemies with allies, because all that ally for you has to say is, I'm against that too. But you have no idea what they're actually for. But when you're fighting for something, it's much easier to identify your adversaries. It's much easier to stay focused, because whenever one person is trying to put this message in your ear and this group is trying to put this message in your ear, you remember what you're fighting for, what comes along with that, and it's easy to discern who is actually an enemy and who is an ally, what message is right, what message is wrong. That's how Jimmy and I, for example, can figure out pretty quickly January 6th is a psyop. Do you know how I know stuff like that? Because of the things that you talk about, Dr. West. How many Black groups have been infiltrated by the FBI and by the CIA? I learned stuff like that from you and people who preach the same message you preached, from the Fred Hamptons of the world, I'm proud of that consistency, that my message is not determined by the person I support or by the Democratic or who the message is coming from as far as party is concerned. And that's my advice is the message is not wrong. The way that it is being perceived by either the inconsistency or someone just inherently feeling attacked, not disagreeing with you, feeling completely attacked, that could be a problem going forward, because even with the Green Party, there's a lot of white people in the Green Party. There's a lot of them, primarily. So you just got to be careful about how you're going about that. That's the advice I would give. And I would say, Jimmy, first of all, I appreciate you coming on. I'm not going to hold you much longer. And what
would you say to this, Niko? Can I ask you a question?
Of course, yeah.
What I started saying at my shows is that it's not about black, white. It's not about left, right. It's about us against them, right against wrong. And that's the only thing that scares them. When Christian Smalls organized on Staten Island, that scares the shit. By the way, when you organize, we're all workers. I don't need to know what you think about other things. All I need to know is, are you going to join with me to oppose the oligarchy and this economic war against us? That's all I need to know. And guess what that does? That then empowers Black people, that empowers brown people, that empowers LGBTQ people. When you have that message, that gives you power, and then you can use that power to help those groups. If you come with a fractured message of white supremacy, LGBTQ, which is what the Democrats run on, it fractures your movement, it fractures your message.
Yeah.
And that's all I'm trying to. And so when I say it's not about left, right, it's not about black, white, it's about us against them, that actually scares the establishment, which is why they want to stop those kind of movements so hard. They call it a left-brown alliance. They can't make, but we all know that that's the only thing that scares them. And what Christian Smalls did scared the shit out of them. That's why they invited him to the White House.
I will only add one more thing. I mean, yeah, that's true. It is like at the end of the day, it's literally has to be about us versus them. And I would even make the argument to add on to that you can still make that argument and talk about the things that Dr. West talks about. Like when you're talking about class warfare and you want to criticize, you can even use it to criticize Trump if you would have liked. To be real, why not talk about how black businesses were affected and then the Democrats didn't seem to give a single fuck about it during the pandemic? That is directly acknowledging racism. It is directly attacking the establishment, and it is still bolstering the class war. And it's just another way to reiterate how it's us versus them. And now you're educating a side who may not have otherwise been interested in that issue, saying like, damn, I didn't know y'all were going through it like that. It's like, yeah, man, this is just the class where we're all part of. And it makes it more sympathetic to your message.
So I grew up in Chicago, and this is, I should have told this story to Cornel West. So when there was a Democratic machine, was Mayor Daley, right? And so he just got reelected every 4 years. Nobody thought about it. There's a political machine in Chicago, and he was the guy who ran it, right? He dies unexpectedly. So now two of his advisors run against each other. Two white people run against each other for the Democratic primary nomination. There's a third guy. His name is Harold Washington, who's black. So the white people split the vote. Harold Washington wins the primary. So now everybody in white Chicago, who were Democrats their whole life, now became Republicans in the general election because they were afraid of a black guy taking over. So they voted for this guy, Bernie Epton. Nobody ever heard of him before or since. But still, Harold Washington was able to win. He won. He became mayor. And if you waited a couple of years, like for the next election, he got more white vote. He started to get white support. And why did that happen? Because people were like, well, you know, I might not agree with everything he says, but the snow got plowed, the garbage got picked up, crime is a thing. So everything, they saw his results and they were like, yeah. In fact, I remember listening to an NPR report about that, how racist whites came along to supporting Harold Washington. And so there's a way to reach out to people. There's a way to get them. And I was just trying to impress upon him that you could do that. Now, there's this guy, Theo Vaughn, who's a hilarious comedian. He grew up poor. And he says this really funny joke about, he said, I heard about white privilege. I didn't have it. I knew some people had it. I saw some people who had sweaters. I had to wear 2 tank tops in the winter. He said, then my black friends would say to me, hey, man, look what you all did to us. And he said, do you think I would do all this to you and then move in next door? So he goes, we're in this together, brother. That's what Theo Vaughn says. We're in this together. And
it just looks different. But I think that some people, what a lot of people would like to see acknowledged more often is like, I know, I understand what you're going, or I sympathize with what you're going through. And that's what I think that in general, that's just like an aside. Like, I think that doesn't happen enough until, like, I made a comment yesterday on Twitter. I said, it upsets me a lot of times when I see too many people only quote black people when it's to own the neoliberals or to like question racism. Like to bring in like the question of legitimacy of racism. That's the only time they want to quote MLK. That's not like, fuck that. Like, why the hell is it? Don't quote MLK just to try to shut down racism, because that's not what he meant by content of your character. He meant in like whatever you might believe about race, the race or racism, whatever. I still want you to judge somebody by the content of your character. Not that he doesn't want you to acknowledge their race, like that's part of their identity. Like just like you being a working class comedian, that is part of who you are, and it needs to be taken in context while still judging you by the content of your character. That's like, I got so pissed. I saw people commenting yesterday when I was on RBN and on Twitter people were, oh, Jimmy just, I'm like, no, what the fuck? Where did I start getting this from? I'm really having to explain it, tell a story about how like the legitimate racism that I've experienced as an independent journalist, and the fact that like you brought me on to talk about the DNC fraud lawsuit at a time where people were going out of their way to not do so because they didn't want me to get credit for it. Or how you brought on Sabby or brought on Nick and gone on to all these people's shows and are directly responsible for a lot of the smaller channels from minorities growing. Because of like, now, don't get me wrong, I do believe that it's possible that you can have a blind spot at times because like Jimmy, you're a white guy, but I have a blind spot to some of your experiences because I'm a black guy. But the only way we can figure it, we have to have conversations about these things. Does not mean you're racist, doesn't mean that I hate white people. It just means that we have different experiences and we're limited by those experiences, but we have to talk and understand each other. That does not mean you insult a person that does not understand you. How can he possibly understand you if he's not talked to you and gotten to know you? You have not lived my experiences, I have not lived yours. And so that's like, I hate when people jump to like the person who shall not be named trying to jump on the bandwagon, and another person who's also racist his goddamn self. First of all, I know for a fact he's racist, but he tried to jump on the bandwagon and jump on his Jimmy's a racist bandwagon. Jimmy is, I promise you, there are a lot of enemies to black people. And most of them, by the way, I can say, yeah, there's a lot of conservatives that tweet shit about black people on Twitter all day because it gets them a bunch of impressions. I'm not as worried about them. They're not afraid to talk to black people and challenge black people even, or have those conversations with black people. It's the neoliberals, the white neoliberals, who will literally try to erase black people that I am concerned with. Unless you're a Kamala or unless you're an Obama. Jimmy has never tried to erase black people. Jimmy bringing on Cornel West at a time where I haven't seen, Crystal and Kyle said they invited Cornel West, so I'm not sure how accurate that is or why he hasn't gone on yet, but he hasn't accepted that invite. But I don't even know how that conversation will go though, right? Like how would that conversation legitimately go? Would they treat him how people have treated Bree in the past? How people have treated me in the past? Like purposely trying to trigger them, purposely trying to get them emotional because they're acting in bad faith. I'm pretty sure that's exactly how it would go. That's why it's important. So we can identify when someone could be a little bit more sensitive to a certain issue of race and versus someone who's actually being deliberately racist. Jimmy is not racist. I will not put up with that bullshit slander. I've been very clear about that. And it does us a disservice as a movement when you pretend because you don't like Jimmy that he's racist, but then the people who are pushing literal fucking Jim Crow Joe, they're actually just acting in the best interest of black people. That's bullshit. So you got anything else to say, Jimmy, before we get up out of here?
I just want to say, accept your criticism or critique that I have blind spots. I'm sure I have blind spots, right? And that's what I was trying to show to Cornel. Maybe you have a blind spot about this, and I'm trying to help you. And the one other thing is that I know that if I was born black, I would probably be the type of guy who would have a hard time to stop talking about it. And I
you have a hard time stop talking about your experiences. Yeah,
that's right. I can't stop talking about so I get that flex. That's why I'm trying to make it's going to take an effort to craft a message that isn't dead upon arrival with the groups of people you want to meet. You can still have the same policies. You can still have the same thrust of importance, but you just have to craft it. That's all I was trying to say. And it was really sad to see people call me a racist for that. And Cornel West to actually promote that. It was really disgusting and it's depressing. I'm really depressed and I don't know what I'm going to do. But now that he's got Peter Dahl with him, it makes it really hard.
Yeah, man. I don't know what that's about because I was like, I know there's a lot of people in the Green Party who have electoral experience. Hell, you should have brought on Jill Stein for that matter.
Got to get rid of that guy.
Yeah.
If it doesn't get rid of that guy, it's not good. He's shitting the bed with that, and that's not good.
Yeah,
but I got to go ahead.
There, I'm gonna give him some runway. I'm gonna give you a little bit of runway, but I don't see that being a good. Once again, the moment that when he announced, I would say the comments were literally 50-50, right? People were like, "Fuck that guy," and people were like, whatever. But the problem is when you bring somebody in your campaign to run your campaign that is that divisive, that decision was that divisive. Now you have to make an executive decision. Like, look, I have nothing personally against you, but this is a campaign that we're running. And for whatever reason, even if, you know, Dr. West doesn't necessarily know about the reason, like for whatever reason, everybody has a problem, or at least half of the people that like me have a problem with you. And therefore you have to take a lesser role. It's not anything personal. It's a business. You're running a campaign and you need to appeal to the widest audience possible. And when half of the people, the reason they don't like Peter Dow is because of that campaign that Cornel West worked for, which is Bernie's campaign. Right? So should be a little bit of understanding about it. But yeah, I really hope going forward, though, I truly hope that at the bare minimum, you guys can reconcile, because I think for the good of the movement, it's not just you depressed, bro. Like I can tell you that, like people are literally saddened because of y'all's interaction, because of his reaction, because of your reaction, because of other people's reactions. And the fact that before that interview, even though there were disagreements that were had with Dr. West, people didn't feel like he was ignoring the other side of the argument. That's different entirely. And that they didn't think that he would attack somebody who was so avidly for him. I hope I didn't overstep my boundaries by saying this, but on my show with him, I said, like, yo, I said, Jimmy, the reason I say he probably has more respect for you is probably why I got more defensive, because he considered you one of his political heroes. And it's hard to feel disrespected and misunderstood by somebody that you consider a political hero. Is that like, am I overstepping my boundaries by saying that? Would that be somewhat accurate?
No, definitely. That's definitely. I had such great affection for Dr. West, and that's why it's bothersome. Yeah, that's it. But you know what? I really have to go.
Go ahead. I'm late from. Oh yeah, go ahead. Thank you so much, Jimmy. I appreciate you coming on.
Okay, thank you, pal.
Peace.